And good morning and welcome to West Nyack. My name is Alejandro Calixto, and I have the honor to work as the director of the Cornell IPM program. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us for this year's gathering. This is actually our 12th annual conference. And really, kudos to Betsy Lamb, who is outside in the registration table. She's been the engine behind this conference. We come together today to explore a compelling and timely theme: pests at the perimeter, how landscape design influences indoor pest intrusion. It is a topic that touches all of us, whether you are a homeowner, a master gardener, a seasoned professional, or just beginning your journey in pest management. Our outdoor spaces play a powerful role in shaping what happens indoors. We humans, we continue transforming the environment, and the environment that is around our houses, and that really gives the conditions for many pests to thrive. So throughout the day, you will hear from our leading experts and passionate practitioners who will share their research, insights, and practical strategies for managing pest challenges in a smarter and more sustainable ways. A heartfelt thank you goes to our keynote speaker, Barb Neal, whose expertise and perspective set the tone for what promises to be an inspiring day. We also want to recognize the incredible Cornell IPM team, some of whom you will hear from during today's session, and many others who work tirelessly behind the scenes to bring this event to life. Special thanks to Matt Fry. Matt, brace yourself. Jody Gangloff Kaufman, Jody Benedict, which she is online, Carrie Carminati, our communication specialist, Betsy Lamb, of course, and all the speakers from our program that you will meet today. It was a tremendous team work, and they're making this conference possible. Thank you all for being here today. We hope you leave today not only with the new knowledge and connections, but also with a renewed sense of what IPM can do for you, your work, your home, and your communities. Enjoy the sessions, the conversations, and the inspiration, and let's make this another memorable and impactful day. And I'm looking forward to talk to each one of you, and thank you so much.
And now for the main event. So our first speaker, our keynote speaker, is Barb Neal, who is a retired horticulture and agriculture educator from CCE Tioga. She had many roles as a horticulturist during her career, owner of a design and build landscape company, horticulturist for a company that maintained the federal buildings in Washington, D.C. I've seen that work, and a consulting arborist and adjunct professor at George Washington University for the Sustainable Landscape Design Master's Program. It's nice. She loves to talk about landscape design, trees, especially urban trees, and soil assessment and management. And so let me invite you up.
Wow, I've never been a keynote speaker before. I've done a lot of speaking. And this is a topic that it's a little bit at the perimeter for me as a landscape sort of designer and a horticulturist. But when Jody asked me to do it, I said, I had kind of a resounding like, maybe. What? Pests at the perimeter? But the more I thought about it, and then Jody had 3 days for me to, gave me 3 days to think about it before I said yes. I'm like, you know what? There is some value in really thinking about how does our landscape impact what's happening in our houses. And so you're going to hear from a lot of experts after me. I'm an expert in some things, but pests is not particularly my purview. But what I'm going to try to do is set the table for these experts. You're going to, you have like almost world experts on ticks and stinging insects and diversity and all sorts of things like that. So I'm just going to set the table for you, kind of create a framework for you to put the rest of these talks into perspective. And how many of you are master gardeners? A bunch of you. If you do any grow line work or, where you're answering questions, you probably know a lot of them are household pests, right? You think you did all this training to learn how to grow plants, and people just want to know how to kill the bees in their house, right? And I would gather it's almost like 40% of our calls. What do you guys think? Does any of you do grow line kind of? It's a lot. It's a lot. So, all right. And here's a little bit of confession. It's breaking news. So I don't have cable at home. And so my little guilty pleasure when I stay at a hotel is I watch Home and Garden TV, and I watch House Hunters and House Hunters International. Anybody with me on that? All right, right? Nothing bad happens. It's all fake, animosity because they already bought the house or whatever. But I just like it. Well, it has commercials, and I'm a BritBox person, so I don't usually have commercials. And there was twice during the half-hour show that I watched, there was a commercial for Raid. And it never showed a pest. It showed a picture of a can of Raid being, sprayed, and it said, "Protect your family." And I thought that was really interesting for all you IPM people. You guys are like monitoring pests and identifying pests and setting up action thresholds. But the marketers who know how to sell this product is protect your family. And I just thought that's an interesting framework too, that it's like, it was like they were selling a security system or a gun or something. But this is where people's minds are, right? Protect your family, spray the hell out of every pest. So that's sort of a lead up. Do you have to do it or do I do it? Okay. All right, let's pretend this is your house. This is actually a house that was raffled off in Ireland. But in Ireland, they don't do any landscaping. Has anybody been there? They don't have landscape around their, often it's concrete right to the house. So they probably don't have as many pests coming in. But anyway, I thought here's your house. You don't have any landscape, but you guys are landscape people. You want to have something nice looking. If I was a landscape designer, how would I approach this design? I've got a blank palette. Now, I'm going to get you inside a couple people's heads. So first, a landscape designer's head. Any designers here? Not yet. Okay, not yet. So, often you think of landscape designers and they're thinking about how can I make this place beautiful, right? There's an aesthetic value to a landscape design. How do you put something together that the homeowner, or you, if you were the homeowner, are going to really enjoy every single time you walk into your house? So that's kind of top of mind. And then there's, they have to think like, well, we need a place to put the garbage cans. And we don't want to see them. You're not going to ever see the garbage cans on the front, right in front of the house, right? It has to be on the side, maybe covered by a plant or a fence. So there's functional use. How are we going to get people, like what's the hardscape, we call that in landscape, the paving going to look like? And then we kind of move down. Well, what's the budget? Do they have champagne tastes on a beer budget? What's the budget? Is it feasible to do it? Do you have a slope like that and they want a tennis court? That's not going to work. And then you have to think about, well, what's the site like? What's the topography? What's the sunlight? What's the soils? Way down the list is maintenance, thinking about maintenance for the future and for the next 25 years while that landscape's growing in. And even further down, I think, are pests. And I remember a long time ago when I was at graduate school, there was a weed scientist and he was lecturing about weeds to landscape designers. And I'm sitting there with my friends and he goes, you really have to think about how the property is going to be maintained when you do a landscape design. And we were like, for God's sake, that's too much. That was just a bridge too far. Like, I can't think about that. I'm already thinking about what plants to use, what soil to use, what soil amendment, how you're going to plant it, how's it going to cost, how are you going to order all the plants, how are you going to access the site. The last thing you're going to think about is how you take care of a landscape. And then God punished me for thinking that, because I ended up being in charge of the maintenance of these huge federal buildings. And then I got it. Like, when you put in ground cover and then you have to wait 4 years for it to really create a cover, and you're weeding that for 4 years, you're like, aha. Or if you realize, like, certain plants work well together maintenance wise, and certain plants don't work as well together. Like, if you had ground cover and miscanthus grass that's kind of seedy, is that going to work? No, because there's always going to be seeds from this plant head in your ground cover. So then I got it. And you actually, I guess, if you think about nothing else, if you're working with a landscape, think about how it is going to impact the next 25 years when you're taking care of that property, whether it be yours or a commercial property. All right, that's a landscape designer's head. Now, like, this landscape probably started out okay, right? But I don't know if you can see, there's like juniper. Anybody enjoyed weeding out juniper beds? Super fun, right? You get all scratched, it's annoying, you hate your life. So, and there's, if the pointer works. It's always a question. You know, there's like some vine that somebody forgot to trim, and now it's growing over the walkway. This looks kind of familiar, right? I mean, you know, this year with the rain, you don't go out for 2 weeks. That's what everyone's garden looks like. That's what mine looks like. But it's just maybe not thinking about how maintenance affects your landscape. Now, here's the other head. There's like 8 of these IPM specialists here. Like right now, everybody look at Matt's head. Inside his head is a different paradigm. Inside his head of integrated pest management, that's what IPM stands for. And Betsy and I in the car were deciding, we're just going to call it pest management, because everybody does integrated pest management. Inside their head, they have this triangle burned into their brain. And what this triangle represents is the methods that you use to manage pests. And ideally, you start with cultural. That means what plant are you growing, and how are you growing it, and are you setting it up for success? If you put junipers, that's sun-loving, in the shade, that's a cultural mismatch, right? You need to match the plant and the site, and you have to grow the plants in a manner to which they are going to be the healthiest, and that way they can fend off pests, or at least accept a little munching and just keep going, right? And then there's physical methods. You can put weed barriers, or you can mulch. Those will be, you know, some physical barriers to weeds starting or whatever. And then moving up, if you still have a problem with a pest, you can use biological methods. You can use soaps and oils. You can use, you know, like, and it's a fun word, entomopathic nematodes, bug-eating nematodes, things like that, biological good guys. And then moving up further, you want to use as little as possible chemical answers to your pest problems. And if you're going to use a chemical answer, you know, try a softer chemical first, one that perhaps has a caution label instead of a warning or danger. And at the very top are conventional pesticides. Now, I am a big believer in using as much organic materials as possible. But again, when I was maintaining huge federal landscapes, the size, you know, blocks of plants, yes, I have used conventional pesticides, and I think it's appropriate too. This is a personal decision, or perhaps if it's I see you're with Vassar. It's going to be a institutional decision. Can you use like Roundup or you can? Okay. And that, believe me, that was a conversation that probably went on for like a zillion years, right? Like, should we do it? Should we not do it? Right? So it's a big deal these days, especially in institutions, to make a decision to use conventional pesticides. But it is as long as they're done correctly, according to the label, it's okay. Master gardeners, you have to tread a little bit of a different line. You may have your own personal beliefs, and they're all completely valid. But you may be working with someone like, I got a whole lot of stuff, what am I going to spray? Right? And you got to meet them where they are, right? So anyway, this is all what happens inside Matt's head and Betsy's head. All right, here's a little more that happens. So in integrated pest management, the first thing is you identify what the bug or whatever pest is. It may be a good guy. Mara, you're going to be talking about good guys, right? So not every bug is a bad bug. There are lots and lots of good bugs. There are lots and lots of bugs that kind of hang out doing their thing and don't impact plants at all. So the first thing you have to do is identify what do you have? And is it growing, or is it just like a couple of spiders on something, whatever? And then this is the fancy word, you set an action threshold. And that means when do you just look at it and go like, huh, there's a couple bugs on that plant. And then you go, I got to get coffee, and you leave. But then you come back, you're like, there's a few more bugs on that plant, and now I see some damage on the leaves. And what's happening is, as the pest population goes up, the damage you see is starting to go up. And IPM people talk about this action threshold and this economic threshold. We're like, uh-oh, I'm starting to lose money. So now take yourself out of your landscape and put yourself in a farmer's field, and you're growing peppers, right? You can take a few bugs on the peppers, but then all of a sudden, if there are too many and they're doing damage, you're losing money because you're losing pepper production, right? So it's going to cost you money to have these bugs. So you have to do something. So let's say you get out and you spray a little oil or something, and it'll knock the bug. This is the point at which you might think about doing some action, and it will drop the pest, hopefully, drop the pest level down. And hopefully you're monitoring it again. You're going back and saying like, did that spray work? And then, it's not going to be 100% effective. There'll be some more bugs moving up. Now, if you didn't do anything, the bugs would keep going until all of a sudden you really it's costing you. It's hitting your wallet. We'll get back to that in a minute. But everybody kind of got that. There's like a levels that you have to make decisions at and take action or decide not to take action. All right, here's where the rubber meets the road. I was just talking about peppers, but we're talking about spiders. We're talking about roaches, rats, termites, carpenter bees. All right, spider. Let's get down and dirty. Spiders. All right, turn to the next person. And I'm giving you've just seen a spider in your dining room. It's on the wall, about this big. Okay, you've just seen a spider. What do? Do you run into the next room and say, honey, go kill the spider? Because you are not going to touch that spider. You're not even going to be in the room until that spider is gone. Do you just grab a piece of paper and go, whack, and kill the spider? Or do you carefully collect the spider and bring it outside and release it? Go forth, multiply. All right, share with each other. What would you do? Or is there something else that you would do? Or are you getting the spray out, like protect your family? Okay, raise your hand if the person that you talked to had the exact same answer as, okay, these people there, these people. So everybody else had a different answer, right? So you had, so I was sort of thinking about this topic and I thought, I know, I'm going to have this little spider conversation because I don't really care about spiders, except when they're in the bathroom. I really don't have any tolerance for that. But, and in the bedroom, yeah, no. That's why I said kitchen. It's not, it's just in the kitchen or dining room, whatever. I was changing and I was in the pool locker room and my friend is a vegan. And I'm saying like, yeah, you know, the spider thing, what you do. And a friend of mine happens to be there. She goes, that's where I get out the can of spray. And the vegan's just like, oh. So we all have different thresholds for these kind of pests. Now this is a spider, right? It's going to be a little different depending on the pest and also depending on the area. As I said, I don't want a spider in my bed because I am one of those people who are like, hey, little buddy. Or sometimes I'm a smasher, I don't know. So ants, we're going to be talking about ants. Do you have a tolerance for ants? Bees? Well, you know, when a bee flies in, I'm like, come on, buddy, get out, get out. Cockroaches? That's kind of a hard no, right? Ladybugs, oh, they're so cute, little ladybug. All right, here's another confession. I'll get those little ladybugs, the little Asiatic ladybugs, and I'll put a little bit of honey on the window where they're crawling so they have something to eat. I think I probably stand alone in that, but I do like to watch it. They go and they get their honey. Rats and mice, hard no, right? Even a vegan is probably putting that trap out. Termites, probably a hard no. It's economic damage to your house. Snakes, we have some people are like, I gotta move, right? So we have different tolerances to the different pests. And that's and that's again with master gardeners or people who are doing institutional landscapes. You have to understand that people have different tolerances and kind of work with them. So back to that kind of academic looking slide. So in a household setting, there's really not an economic loss, except for maybe termites, because you got to pay to fix them. So we really don't have an economic threshold. We have like, we have a problem threshold, right? And we don't get up to like an injury level unless it's termites. But we have a honey, we're still in the house. And I think Susanna is going to tell you sort of the reverse of that story with her direct experience. Because somebody, she bought a house where they were like, we got to sell the house. Because there were, I'm not going to say, hold it, surprise. So, everybody has this different tolerance for things. All right, so let's go back here and just a reminder slide, we're going to try to work so that we avoid these problems. We don't import our pests by using good landscape principles. This is not a surprise slide, right? This is not the big reveal. We've been talking about right plant, right place for a million zillion years as horticulturists. And all it means is you need to know your site and know the character and know your plants and then marry them so that you have a plant that's going to be happy in the site that you have. You don't want to force a plant to live where it can't. If you have pH soils of 7 and you want a blueberry field, that isn't going to work because blueberries need a low pH. If you have a wet site and you have yews, that isn't going to work because yews like a dry site, right? So I think I'm preaching to the choir here, right? I mean, yeah. All right, but, and just as a horticulturist, I feel like I have to go through a few of the steps. So you want to know what the sunlight levels are in let's again, just imagine that house and you're just doing a front landscape. What's the sunlight levels? What is the soil? I'm sorry, with the plants, you need to know what sunlight they like, what kind of soil they like, how big are they going to grow, and at what rate, so that you can figure out what the spacing is. And it is really good to look at the cultivars, the cultivated varieties of plants, and know what ones are more pest resistant than others. Because why import your problems, right? I don't want to have something that I'm going to have to spray just to keep alive. And on the site side, that's sort of my specialty. You definitely need to know what hardiness zone you're in and keep abreast of the changes because they are changing and zones are getting warmer. So we might have been a zone 6, we're now warmer than that in certain areas, and you can track that on if you just Google it up. And that's the expected minimum temperature. We also have to now track a little bit about expected high temperatures because the summer nights are warmer than they used to be. That's a big difference. And so some plants can't really, they can take the minimum temperature, but just that high temperature that gets them really stressed out. You want to be able to quantify your sunlight levels, like how much sun do you really get, and then do some good soil work. That usually means sending the soil, get a soil test kit, and send that off. But I want to dive in on 2 things that a lot of people make mistakes about. First, ironically, is one of the easiest is sunlight, because you see full sun. Full sun is 6 hours afternoon sun. If it starts being sunny at 8 in your place and goes, what, even 2, that's not full sun. That's morning sun. The strongest sun is from like 11 to maybe 2 hours before sunset, depending on the time. That's full sun. If you only have morning sun, that's part sun. And a lot of people get that mixed up. Like people, oh yeah, I got full sun. I mean, it's full sun from like 9 a.m. to 10:30. That is not full sun, right? Just because you're getting, you know, a blast of sun for that time, it's not considered full sun. And then, you know, there's gradations in that, like a dappled sun, if you have like a honey locust or something that allows that, say the honey locust is getting full sun, but underneath it is sort of dappley light. I would still call that a, you know, like a partial shade kind of thing. It's not full sun, even though the tree is getting full sun, the bed underneath is not. So just be a little conscious of that. And this is a perfect time to be looking at your sunlight levels because this is when you get the most sun, right? Well, not this year. What am I thinking? Okay. And then I'm a soils person. And so I think this is really important and where a lot of people fall down. And that is you need to have decent drainage on your site. At least you need to know whether you do or not. Hopefully you do. And the Barb Neal method this is on WikiHow. Can you imagine somebody actually did a WikiHow on how to like dig a hole? There was literally one on how to dig a hole. Okay, but pro tip, it is a pro tip because you put the soil on a tarp, right? And that makes it clean up easier. So write that down, that's a good tip. So you dig a hole about 18 inches, about this big, right? And as long as it isn't today, because our soils are all completely saturated right now, if it's a normal year, you have to fill up that hole with water and let that drain out. And I put a little point on, here it says, let it seep out, and then this says, let it seep down. And there is a distinction because when you do that hole and you first fill it up with water, water can move sideways as well as down through gravity. It can be pulled under tension from drier soil. So the idea is that You want to have a hole that is fully saturated. So that's why you can't just put water in and make sure that that water drains out. Because the first water is actually going to get pulled by tension, probably sideways. And then once that whole area around the hole is saturated, when you fill that up again, now you're testing water through the soil profile. So you're only going through down. And you'll see again, if you Google up, oh, it needs to be 6 inches an hour, 3 inches an hour. I've decided, this is Barb Nail TM, it just has to be gone in 24 hours. If it's gone in 24 hours, you're good. If frogs are jumping in it, like in my soil, if I do this, frogs are jumping in it because there's water, I know I have poorly drained soil. Does that mean I move? No, but I have to adapt what I'm doing to address poor drainage in my soil. Everybody kind of get that? If it drains through, you're probably okay for most plants. There are a few special plants like lavender, say, that really like well-drained soil. Rhododendrons. They need really well-drained soil. But for most plants, as long as that water can drain through in 24 hours, then they'll probably be fine. Okay, so those are the two that I wanted to kind of just point out for you. All right, here's the interactive part. Anybody have deer trouble? Anybody not have deer trouble? Jody doesn't. Where do you live? All right. Raul, do you have deer trouble? You do. Okay. So only Jody, because she lives. There's no deer in Babylon. All right. Where do you live? In an apartment. Yeah. So your patio, your planters are fine. All right. So most people, where do you live? Oh, okay. So, but everybody else is like, you're so lucky, right? Because what do deer not eat? Concrete, daffodils. There is one that has come up as important, but also from a pest point of view, boxwood. They will not eat boxwood. But guess what? Is boxwood a pesky kind of plant? Heck yeah, right? So we're seeing, Master Gardeners, you'll be seeing more people. I got boxwood blight, I got boxwood mites, I got white flies. So we have, you solve one problem, deer ain't gonna eat it, but you're gonna import, some other problems. So deer they're gonna eat everything. And you can look up deer-resistant plants and things, but there are very, very few plants that a deer won't eat if they're really hungry. And depending on the deer pressure where I live, I now have woofering hosts. I'm a woofer host, so that means youngsters often are coming to my farm and they're like, oh, we really want to see a deer because we live in Brooklyn. I'm like, oh, you will see deer. And we did, we saw a fawn. What about fungal issues? What plants, do you think, when you think about a plant, you're like, oh man, that always has a fungal problem. Anybody have some, what's that? Lilacs, definitely. They got a part, peonies. What else? What's that? Roses. Yeah. So does that mean you can't have a rose in your garden? No, you're going to look for a plant, a cultivar that is more resistant, right? And same lilacs, I don't know if they, lilacs, it would be, you'd have to work with the culture, like how you maintain the lilac to bring as much air circulation as possible. So it's okay to have some of these problematic plants, but you need to do a little extra work with them, right? What about spider mites? You guys have an idea of where you might see spider mites? Bing, dwarf Alberta spruce and Alberta spruce. Almost everyone will get it, right? What about Japanese beetles? What ones get Japanese beetles? What plants? We're back to the roses. Lindens, yeah. So it just is good to be up on the pests. And I remember there's a fantastic entomologist out of University of Maryland, Dr. Mike Raup, and it can get overwhelming, guys, right? There's a million different plants, there's a million different pests and diseases. He goes, you got to know 10, just the big 10. I would say these are, like you got to know your deer, you got to know your spider mites. In downstate here, lace bugs, say for azaleas, you have that. There are going to be some pests that are going to be the big 10. And as long as you know the big 10, that's going to cover most of your problems. And it's going to depend on where you live, what the big 10 are. Where I live, it's deer, 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 Japanese beetles. So how do you, all right, I've set the table for you. So now you're sitting down and you're going to try to figure out what you're going to put in front of that house. So the first thing I would think about is what's your larger landscape? Picking up on the deer thing again, like what kind of pressure are you going to have from deer, from rabbits, whatever. This is sort of just the intro slide. We're going to talk about hardscape, because there are things you can do with hardscape, paving, patios, decks, that can help or create a pest management nightmare. We're going to talk a little teeny bit about trees, my favorite subject. You don't want me getting going on that or you'll be here all day. And then starting with starting planting a bed, like what are some good tips to do that? And then some maintenance. So where are you in your land, in the wider landscape? What's your cultural reference point? If you're near a wooded area, deer, maybe woodchucks, rabbits, that kind of thing. If you're in a suburban landscape, still might have deer, probably fewer, maybe. But there may be herbicide drift from the neighbor who's using a chemical on their lawn or something like that. Or you're in a townhouse in the city. What pest might be more prevalent in the city, Jody? Rats, right? If these are probably what, $5 million New York townhouses, but if there's a 7-Eleven on the corner, they got rats in their property, right? Doesn't matter how expensive those properties are. So, you have different pests depending on where you are. And so start with that. Where am I and what pests am I likely to have so that I can do planting to avoid it? All right, second one, hardscapes. These are just little pro tips for maintenance. I used to work in the greater, the Beltway, inside the Beltway. Alexandria, Virginia is beautiful with the brick, the colonial brick. But this is what happens over time on a beautiful brick paving, and I've done that herringbone. That's a pain in the butt to build. You got to cut all those pieces. It looks amazing. And then if nobody does anything, that's what it looks like. And then are those weeds easy to dig out? No, because there's cracks in it. So if you want to make it easier to maintain weed-free, keep those weed pests out, minimize the cracks in your pavers. You can think about, there can be problems, and I think, is it Matt, you're going to be talking about, the sort of interface between the house, landscape beds, and the house itself. You can think about having like a setback like that. Now I look at that and I see, well, that's nice. They have a nice hard edge on the, right here, a nice steel edge, it looks like, because you're never going to get that plastic edging. Do not buy that. That's a pro tip. Get the steel edging. So that's nice. It's going to keep a hard edge. Gravel, is that fun to weed? Not so, not so. So it doesn't mean you don't use it, but like, I'm importing a little work here. It may look great right now, but in 3 years, there's going to be weeds there, right? I also want to point out how close that is. You see, it's almost touching the siding. That's a big no-no. You're going to talk about that, right? Okay. So from a professional landscape, I would always say 6 inches is minimum from the bottom of the siding to your landscape. 6 inches. Does anyone think it should be more? I don't know, IPM people. That's just my guidance. Sometimes that's hard, right? Because you've got to get positive drainage away from the house because you don't want water in your basement. But like that, I would be nervous about that. And so, but at least they're doing that and keeping it drier than having mulch that can hold more water. So at least they get like a B out of that, maybe a B minus, because I would still like to see, I'd like to see more space there. But, you know, holding the plants off, you know, away from the landscape bed. Don't forget they grow. And, you know, these cute little plants that are this big, if you're planting them right next to the house, they're going to grow up against the siding. And that can be a place where mold can develop, and it can just, you know, keep it moister, which allows funguses, bees. It's easier for bees to get through if it's softer wood. All right, here's another pro tip. And this is a biggie. Don't ever have a space where a wasp can fly in and set a nest up and you can't get there. Has anybody done that? You guys are smart. So has anybody had a situation where they had a wasp nest develop and they couldn't spray it, couldn't reach it? Where was it? Yeah, no, I mean, like what's the kind of structure? Around a deck, and you couldn't. Okay, yeah. I had it, I have a pool and it was in the heater. And they're like, oh, you cannot spray into a gas heater. But so they happily just flew in and out, but I couldn't get there. But when we were designing our house, I was like, oh, we could have a near ground level deck. And I was like, absolutely not. In the country, there are wasp nests everywhere. And so this, I think I actually got this off of Reddit, this picture, because a guy did it and said, oh my God, I got wasp nests up there and I can't spray them. And now you can't even use your pool because there's this big wasp nest. So that's a really, you know, people don't think about that. So do a patio or something where they can't get to it, or have it high enough, the deck, that you can spray it, because they will come because it's an excellent habitat for them. All right, tree university in like 5 minutes. So you don't want to plant trees right next to the building. I don't think that's a big reveal for you guys, right? But how close is close? Like a little dogwood that's always going to be a small statured tree, I would say 12 feet. But you know, does anybody live where there are really large trees right near their house? Yeah, some of you, right? And then people get concerned that the tree roots are going to crack their foundation. And that can and cannot happen at the same time. So if the tree, there's this thing called the zone of rapid taper. And here's the base of the tree. And you get sort of big gnarly roots at first, and then they go to these smaller roots. And the zone of rapid taper is from like 6 to 10 feet from the radius, from the trunk out, is where your big gnarly roots are. You would never want to put a large tree within 6 or 10 feet of your house, because those roots are pretty big and they are going to exert a pressure. Now, having said that, a small root, if you're out here, that is never going to exert enough pressure on your wall, foundation wall, to be a problem. Except if your foundation already has a crack in it and there's already water, kind of, it's like a more watery place. And it's the same thing with like drain tile, or like, oh, you can't have a tree near during your septic pipe. It's probably not the world's greatest idea to have a tree near your septic pipe, but if it's a PVC pipe, the tree roots cannot break it. But, or if it's the old tile, remember it's kind of like tile and tile pipes. A tree root can and will follow nutrients. That's in fact how they grow. They don't know where to grow, but as they're growing, and if they see, wait a minute, over here there's more nutrients because that's the septic pipe, they're going to proliferate there. And if there's a crack in the pipe, they're going to go right in. And then you've probably all seen pictures of drain tile that's just completely full of roots. Yes, they can do that, but they can't break the tile. They can't physically, trees can't even grow in semi-compacted soil. So they can't they can't they're not like a pileated woodpecker, like, but they're gonna follow a crack and they're gonna exploit a crack. And I would say that's true with trees and foundations too. So keep your big trees, at least 10 feet. I would go further than 10 feet, but keep your trees away from the foundation. Smaller trees, it's not going to be a problem. And that's usually, it's kind of a landscape thing. You put a redbud, you put a dogwood, you put a Coosa dogwood, a serviceberry, kind of in your landscape closer to your house. And then the trees are the big trees are further away. Then squirrels. So a lot of people, squirrels can cause some damage, like jumping from a tree branch down to a roof. And I just suggest, when I was a consultant, people would be like, oh, I don't want any tree limbs growing over the roof. They might fall in squirrels. Well, they might fall, yes, but a tree doesn't grow to fail, right? If the tree is healthy, that branch, chances are, is not going to fail. And if it does, it's a few shingles on your roof, right? And if taking off that branch or all those branches to keep it away from your house, it's terrible for the tree, right? If if the tree's like that and all of a sudden this branch is completely gone because you didn't want a branch over your roof, it's not great for your tree. However, I get that you don't want squirrels having, a tequila party on your roof. So I suggest that, at least elevating off your roof at least 6 to 10 feet. That'll keep the branches, even when snow loaded, from scratching your roof. Do I think a squirrel can jump 6 to 10 feet? Yeah, it probably can. You're probably honestly not going to be able to keep them off their roof. Otherwise, they're just going to climb up the siding. But it is worth thinking about. Okay, and trees can bring pests to the party. Anybody know what little pest this is? Box elder. It's a box elder bug. What kind of tree brings a box elder bug? Box elder tree, a box elder maple. And Susanna's going to talk about it a little bit. But, it's funny, horticulturists, like the Bible for horticulturists is Dr. Michael Durer wrote Manual of Woody Landscape Plants. It's like this big. It's all drawings. It's very intimidating. But he has a sense of humor, because under box elder at the end with pests, it said, box elder bugs make fine pests, make fine pets. So to each his own, I guess. And I don't think anybody's planting box elder trees, but you may, if you have one, because it's kind of a weedy tree, you may end up, especially on the sunny side of the house, get box elder bugs. Okay, any questions on trees?
Is it possible to achieve a balance of the tree is close enough to the house to provide shade to the house, but far enough away not to pose a threat to the house?
Yeah, that's a great, did everybody hear the question? Yeah, so the question is there, what's the balance? Because there is a tension between, you want trees near the house for sheltering and scale. That's one thing trees bring, is just a sense of scale to a property, as well as shade. So you have an environmental benefit, but you don't want them so close they're gonna cause damage to the foundation or what have you. Again, I would just look at the zone of rapid taper and say, if you're 20 feet away from the house, you're probably okay. Having said that, there are trees that grow like this, upright, and there are trees that are very broad spreading branches. So it is important to know what the shape of the tree is and how big it's going to eventually be. All right, we're going to take a commercial break right here because I'm right here. Trees, ladies, gentlemen, especially downstate, a big oak comes down because it's at the end of its life. What goes in its place in general? What do they plant instead? A redbud, a dogwood, serviceberry, little trees. We need to plant the legacy trees. They're not being replaced. So even if you're working for a town and the town is like, when a tree comes down, you got to plant another tree. Donuts to dollars, it's an oak being replaced by a redbud that's going to get maybe 20 feet tall and die in about 25 years. So, that's my commercial. Plant a legacy tree somewhere in an appropriate place, because we need that for the next generation of trees. All right. So now you want a beautiful landscape bed. You want Martha Stewart to be jealous, right? But there's a little tricky thing called the weed bank, the weed seed bank. So if you want to get that, you can't start with this, which pretty much looked like my front yard. So, all right, I will confess, I have a little farm. We've been doing lots of planting. My front landscape was terrible. And it had subsided. It's a new house, well, it's 10 years old now. And it had against the house had subsided, which is normal. They don't usually compact really right against the house. So it had gone down 6 inches. So for 2 years, we're both, and I'm married to a landscape architect, right? So we know better. And you'd be like, oh, man, that's not good. Drainage into the house is subside. We got to do something about that. That went on for about 3 years. And then finally, we did do something last year. And we weeded everything out. But we knew we couldn't just plant right back in because the weeds will just come back. I mean, no matter how good you are at planting, weeds out, it's going to pop back, and kind of astonishingly fast. So I recommend, if you're starting with a really bad weed seed bank like this plant, remember every plant, the seeds that are produced from a weed can last 7 years at least in the soil. So you got to stay on top of it. But if you've already lost it, you're going to be fighting weeds for 7 years in this landscape bed, at least, right? So what we did, I'm a big fan of cardboard. So we cleared out all the weeds. In fact, I think we cleared out, let the weeds kind of pop a little, cleared them out. Then we put cardboard down and mulch. And we haven't yet planted because it hasn't yet stopped raining. But it has been, so we're trying to just get it clear. And a few weeds have popped up, and yes, we'll be able to take care of them. But that, try to start with as clean a landscape bed as possible, because let's just project this. You get a little grant for your community, and you're going to put this little pollinator pathway planting. Who's not for that, right? In this landscape bed in a park. Who's going to take care of it? And oh, it was weedy. You put the little teeny plants in. What's going to happen next year? It's going to be a weed mess, and even the master gardeners are going to be like, it's not worth it, right? So you got to start clean if you can, so that it's going to be successful. One way to be successful with landscape beds is to have a very clear delineation between turf or what other ground plane you have and the bed. So here you have, I mean, it's kind of a little heavy on the old impatience, but you have this is probably a picture from like a nursery. Like, yes, just buy 1,000 plants every year. You know, you want to have a nice clean edge, because that way if a little bit of grass grows in, you'll see it faster. If it's not a nice crisp edge, it's easier for the weeds to kind of creep in. And it just looks professional. This is one reason that a professional landscape always, one of the defining aspects of it is a very crisp edges. You can even have a hard edge, like they have, you know, Home Depot or whatever has these things. Because we have crappy grass, because I don't spray it or anything, we actually put in a steel edging because the grass was just coming in so rapidly because it's stoloniferous, so it just comes in. So we put in a hard edge. So consider that. It's a little more expensive, but it might save you weeding time in the future. And then here's an anti-commercial. A word about geotextiles, like landscape fabrics. I hate them. Now, somebody who loves them, you can love them. Anybody love them? Of course, the weed guy likes them. Jeez, okay. But I personally don't like them because, I mean, they work fantastic for the first 2 years. And it's a fabric that you lay down before you put mulch down, and it does not degrade. But when weed seeds from the top germinate, now they've grown through the fabric, so it's even harder to get them out. And I haven't seen research on this, but just anecdotally from my experience, I think it stops organic cycling, because we have had, you think so? Yeah. So where the mulch would naturally degrade and become organic matter, it really stops that process. And I know, like at our Master Gardener demonstration garden, we had a shade garden that just was always like, I mean, the plants were alive, but they were like, not very healthy. All right, this is really bad. I had 2 new Master Gardeners, just graduated. And I was like, well, what can we do? And they were a little younger than the average Master Gardener, which is like 70. And I was like, well, we've got this geotextile, but it's like under 4 inches of dead mulch. Can you get it out? And they spent like 3 work parties getting it out, got it all out. And I never saw them again. I worked them to death. But that garden is spectacular now, because we have a beautiful gardener who really knows her shade gardens, and the soil has finally been revived, and the plants look amazing. So use geotextiles wisely. For me, and at like a garden scale, I use cardboard because it degrades.
I have to say, I only use it on the soil surface.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it came out, and we thought this was God's gift to landscaping. And we did it everywhere. And then 3 years later, we're like, uh-oh. So. All right. And then here's something that people don't think about. If you're having like a grass path, think about your mower deck. What mower do you have, whether it be a ride-on or a push mower? And you do not want the path to be narrower than your mower deck. Institutional people, am I right? Yes. And do they ever think about it? No. So you've got to think about how the folks are going to be maintaining it, and give them the space, whether to get their mowers around so that things can look really nice. Okay, now this is the most hysterical picture. I should have had an X through this. This was from Lowe's selling the plastic edging, which I already told you not to buy. But how the hell are you going to maintain that? How are you going to mow that grass? It's impossible. You'd have to use a string trimmer. But I had to have that picture, and it just made me laugh. All right. And then this is not the big reveal again with plant selection, the right plant in the right place. And, thinking about pest-resistant using pest-resistant plants. Now, Again, I'm old enough to remember when we started landscaping back in the 80s, we used a lot of non-native plants because nothing ate them, because there were no natural pests of Nandina. I mean, this is in DC, you know, things like that. And we thought that was the greatest thing. We thought Bradford pears were the bomb, right? And horticulturists, we learn really slowly. I'm also a farmer. In farming, like livestock farming, you know you screwed up the day you do it. Like, oh, that fence is good enough. No, it's not. There goes the goat, right? You learn right then. But in vegetable farming, what would be the learning curve? A year? Those tomatoes tasted terrible. I'd once tried Berkeley tie-dye. I thought it was going to be the best thing. They were the worst tomatoes. They produced terribly, and they tasted terrible. So I'm not going to use them next year, right? In horticulture, we learn in like decades. Like, oh man, that tree, that Bradford pear we thought was awesome in the 80s is just a nightmare in the 2000s, right? And we used to plant purple loosestrife. Beautiful plant. Oops. And so we do this again and again. And it's not new. Kudzu was actually imported. You guys know kudzu? It can grow like 6 feet at a time. And I remember, it's more in the South. Do you have it down here? Yes. You do have it down here. Oh dear. Okay. And you know, they can take out forests. I've seen a forest taken out in Bethesda where I used to live. Just, they went up, tulip poplar trees, the tallest trees, up. They just bring them down because they cover it with their foliage. Well, there was an old newsreel of the history of kudzu. And, you know, it was so classic. It was brought in by the railroad companies to stabilize railroad banks. Made sense, right? It grows fast, nothing eats it, you know, stabilizes the bank. And it was like this guy, you know, with the classic, like, horn rim glasses, the pencil protector, like, yeah, I was the one that brought it in. And, well, it did work for what we meant it to do. But meanwhile, they're showing like a picture of a kudzu just like eating a parked car. Right? But my favorite was there was a woman about my age, about my size, and she goes, well, I was Miss Kudzu of 1938, and like kudzu, I have spread. I've tried to find that on YouTube. It was just on a movie. I can't. It was just a memory, but you can't. You gotta love it. So, you know, oh yeah, I got off track. So back in the day, we planted lots of non-native plants because nothing ate it. And I think we have evolved, and I think correctly, that the more we can bring native plants into the mix and allow some pests and predators to exist, we have a better system. It's more balanced ecologically. And they've done, Amara's going to talk a lot about it, but we've learned that a more complex landscape in terms of structural diversity, in terms of plants, you know, the height, the spreads. We need ground covers, we need low perennials, higher perennials, small, you know, some shrubs, some small trees, some middle-sized trees, some large trees. The more that you can bring that kind of structural and cultivar and variety species diversity, actually the healthier the landscape. Now, it does mean there's a tension there because, you know, go back to that first Irish house, there was no diversity, but there's probably no pest problems from it. So you do have this tension of you want a garden, a landscape to have as much life as possible. But with that life, sometimes are some pests that maybe you don't want. But if you've got enough diversity, there'll be some good guys working in your back corner. There'll be, you know, the bugs that eat the other bugs. There'll be, you know, spiders that actually eat bad bugs, right? So you want that. And it is, and I understand there's a tension. between, people would love to have this big garden like that, but that's really hard to maintain. And if you're, if you don't have the time and you don't have your staff like Martha Stewart maintaining it, you've got to think about how do you balance what you can do maintenance wise to and to keep these plantings going. All right, wow, it's like I've done this before. So just a summary. We all have different tolerances for pests, and you're going to be hearing about all sorts of pests. And it's okay that we all have different tolerances and that we would treat pests differently. I think that's okay. And we need to kind of honor that and understand it, not be so judgmental. Always start with a site analysis. You need to know what your soils are, what the light levels are, the pH levels, even wind, microclimate, hardiness zone, all that stuff. Think about the larger landscape, because that's really, if you've got a 7-Eleven or a taco place at the end of your street, you are going to be fighting rats your whole life. So God bless it, don't put up ground cover that provides an excellent home for them. Just don't do it. Keep that ground plane cleaner. It's a joke in horticulture that the answer to everything in horticulture is it depends. Well, it depends on the rain and the sun. But this doesn't, it depends. This is the one thing where there is an absolute. You really have to match the plant characteristics, what the plant likes, with what the site you have. Now you can modify the site to some degree, but there's a limit to what you can do. So it's easier to just work with what you got, maybe enhance it a little bit, but we're not the King Louis XIV who made water run uphill because he was a king, right? We don't have that ability. We can't make something, we can't just take all the soil out and put what we want in. We've got to work with what we have. And then, start thinking about maintenance. How seedy are the plants? What's the weed bank that I'm starting with? And design around that. And that's it, I think, for me. Thank you.